Hey, this is Brian.
And Shelby.
And you're listening to the Hyperspace
Pod Blast. Aren't you a little short for a podcast?
Huh? Ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. Pod Blast. Short and sweet, yeah?
Yes.
Something like that. Anywho, welcome to the Hyperspace Pod Blast.
Be-doop boop.
Very nice addition.
Thank you.
So what are we talking about this week?
We are talking about symbolism and themes in the Last Jedi / sequel trilogy.
Hooray.
Yeah.
So where should we start?
Let's start with a big one, which is salt.
It's salt.
So it's no surprise to anyone who knows me on Twitter that I really enjoy Crate from a geologic standpoint.
You've made that pretty clear on the show as well.
But today we're going to talk about the symbolism of salt, especially its existence on Crate.
So what have you got for us? The only thing I really bring to the table is salt adds like a purification, you know? Like I know sumo wrestlers spread salt before they go into the ring. So it's kind of like, from my point of view, it's sort of like purifying Luke's legacy.
Oh, okay.
Because
that's not where I was going with this.
I know.
Okay.
I know. I like to tangentize. That's a word now.
Okay.
But yeah, like, you know, he's kind of by his own hand drawn his legacy through the mud, even though I think the galaxy at large, like Rey is an example of this, still feels like he's, you know,
Luke Skywalker,
the superhero, right? Well, this is where he comes and purifies that, at least in his own heart and maybe in the Force. And that's, you know, how he's allowed to become part of the Force.
Okay. Yeah. Purification is definitely a symbol of salt. But I also was going to talk about the kind of biblical sense of a salt covenant.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of this as, you know, that salt covenant, which symbolizes friendship, something that, you know, can't be broken. Where in a way, Luke broke his salt covenant with Kylo.
True, yeah.
And we kind of see this face-off where he's kind of paying the price for it while he's, you know, helping his friends escape, but he's there to basically make peace with it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you could also say that what's left of the resistance / turns into a rebellion becomes their own sort of salt covenant.
Yeah.
On Crate. Like, their relationship is really tightly bound at that point, and they've become their own salt covenant.
Yeah, as well as Poe kind of declaring his commitment to them to be a leader,
right,
and to value their lives as he values his own.
And he's kind of, I don't know, thrown off that meme version of salt. You know, he's not salty anymore. He's steadfast.
Right. It also kind of symbolizes that permanence and preservation as well. So, you know, how you use salt to preserve meats or something like that. It's,
right,
you know, preserving the resistance / rebellion.
Yeah, exactly. They're taking what they had and making sure that it survives.
And in a way, preserving the legendary view of Luke.
Oh, true. Yeah. Bringing it back to what I said. Very nice.
Yeah. And, you know, you also go into that preservation, but it also goes into protection against like spirits. So, you know how some people do like a salt circle.
Right, yeah.
So that salt is like a protection from maybe the First Order.
Well, you could even say that, you know, Luke kind of goes out and draws a line in the sand, but it's not sand.
It's
he draws
salt.
a line in the salt. And he sort of does that salt circle long enough for them to escape. So it's sort of...
It's his you shall not pass moment.
Right, yeah, very good. Yeah, exactly. Except instead of being over a giant chasm, we're on a cool salt.
Right. And it also, Crate itself has, this salt planet has been preserving the old rebellion. Considering this was their old base, it preserved all of this history that we're kind of recovering at this point, and that the hope of that rebellion is incorruptible.
Yeah, and that kind of bleeds into the whole idea of rebirth as well.
Right, so salt does symbolize rebirth a lot of times, life, death, and rebirth.
Yeah, so you have the whole, I mean, you could even say it's kind of like the death of the resistance, the rebirth of the rebellion right there on Crate.
Right, I mean, like, there's there's a very obvious rebirth scene as the cave opens up.
Right, yeah, true. And I mean, even like the Falcon busting out too is
yeah, exactly.
Birthy.
That's a thing.
Another new word.
But there's a lot of things that are reborn. Even the First Order in a way is reborn with a new leader, new
true,
leadership.
Yeah, they're kind of this is them getting their
still
feet wet.
Shaping themselves. You know, the idea that Salt rubbing a newborn.
Well, I think they didn't even really know who they were exactly with Snoke, because they'd kind of been like holding off, and they finally surge forward. And, you know, you got to remember that the First Order was kind of like background, not interacting with people until they did the whole Hosnian thing.
Right.
Some people thought they weren't even a threat. So, yeah.
And then, you know, you get into the idea of salt being symbolic of sacrifice. So a lot of biblical sacrifices were always made with salt. So that kind of goes back into Luke's sacrifice that he made for others to escape. And even the potential sacrifice of Finn.
Right, yeah, exactly. The would-be hero, if that had worked.
So moving on, there's also this symbolism of the color green. So we've done the color red before.
Right, yeah. The color red was the sort of on-the-nose obvious one, but there's definitely an interesting take on the color green throughout, even though we don't get to see Luke ignite the green, technically.
Green usually signifies growth, or the lack of experience that one has and the need for growth, which I think applies, you know, the times that we're seeing green in this movie is basically Octu, but also in the sequel trilogy, you see it on Takodana.
Mm-hmm.
Rey even comments on it saying, I didn't know there was this much green in the whole galaxy.
Right.
Which is her first step away from Jakku.
Yeah, that's her growth. It's her beginning.
Right, exactly. And her awe of all the things that she can become.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, Luke has gone to Octu to kind of grow in himself and relax and reflect, regenerate. And Rey goes there to grow herself and gain experience.
Yeah, basically to branch out, not to put too fine a point on the tree.
Right,
symbolism.
it symbolizes new life, renewal, energy, and healing.
Yeah, and I'd say Luke definitely could use some healing because he basically got gutted emotionally.
Right. Right, what we come to find out. But some people will use the color green as something that it's viewed as a relaxing color, and it's supposed to help soothe anxiety. That's why, like, there's the green room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the blue and green usually are like the reverse of red.
Orange, yeah. They say orange, you should be looking at like orange things when you're working out. It revitalizes you, but green is more of like a mellowing, soothing color.
Mm-hmm. You can think of a stop sight too, or a stop light.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the green tells you to go, so go, enjoy, grow, be energized. Sounds like I'm doing yoga. But it also says that too much green can cause people to become like placid or lazy, even moody and depressed, which I think maybe is what happened to Luke. Like Luke may have gone there to use the green and then overdid the green and became his sulky, I'm just here to die,
green milk drinking self.
Yeah, yeah, hey, there's some green.
Although, you know, it's kind of like he had too much growth with that academy, too much going on too fast, and it bred this, you know, this anxiety and this now lethargic Luke.
Yeah, it's like he's been waiting in the green room so long he doesn't even want to go on anymore. Yeah. You know, he's got everything he needs here.
But it's also been said that if you have too little green, exposure to green, it can cause feelings of apathy and fear of rejection.
Yeah, that
Wonder
sounds like someone
we know. So I think about Rey in this situation. So she's dealt with this rejection literally on a very desolate planet.
Yeah, basically greenless planet. Unless someone had something painted or dyed green, you're not going to find green on Jakku, I don't think, in nature.
Right. And speaking of green in nature, it's been said that green gemstones are supposed to create a balance.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Wouldn't it?
Now that actually is kind of off topic interesting since Luke's lightsaber is green.
Yeah, and brings balance to the Force.
Green crystals, you don't say. Very cool. Another thing I'd like to mention about green is a little green guy that shows up.
Oh.
And sort of gives Luke that sense of soothing his anxiety about what to do with the Jedi, what to do with his future and everything like that. So with Yoda being green kind of adds significance to his short but important role in the movie.
I'd agree with that.
Little frog fellow.
It's not easy being green.
That's true. I've heard that.
So let's move on to the idea of reflection. So this is a big one. You have the physical reflection of the mirror cave, where Rey is reflecting on herself and her past and her future. And then you also have a lot of different instances in The Last Jedi of people reflecting on their lives, on their mistakes. You have the reflections between characters. So let's talk about that a little bit. How do you feel about the theme of reflection in The Last Jedi?
This one's not quite as on the nose. It's except for the mirror cave, obviously. I mean, that's almost all about reflection. Like the whole idea with her, sort of that meta reflection where it's just her forever, but then she, realizes it's not forever. Everything kind of
leads to somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
That mirror made me think a lot of bringing in a Harry Potter reference again, the Mirror of Erised.
Yeah.
So the Mirror of Erised, or the Mirror of Desire, if you read it backwards, the inscription on it, which you read it backwards and it says, "I show not your face, but your heart's desire," which is somewhat similar to this mirror in this cave.
Yeah, except I think the mirror in the cave, because it's,
because it's like a dark side mirror, it basically is kind of the opposite
of the dark side. So it's curious what it's showing you, because, what Rey wants to see is kind of what Harry wants to see in the mirror as well. He wants to see his family, and she wants to see this as well, but it kind of just shows herself.
Which I think in this point you want to say, yes, she verbally says, "Let me see my parents."
Right, but
what does her heart want to see?
Yeah, she's looking to find out who she is, and who she is
herself.
Herself, yeah. I think that's a good point. Very interesting. I think another reflection that you can't help but notice, even if you don't know that you're noticing it, is the mirroring of Kylo and Rey.
Oh, yeah.
And their characters are, I think Rian Johnson referred to them as two sides of the same coin, but I think of them as, mirror flip-flopped images, not necessarily opposites. Like, you can see each other in them, but they're not the same.
Mm-hmm. I also think about that in a physical sense of like the Rey and Kylo mirror flip-flop, but then there's also the mirrored, basically the island itself, the top being the light, the underneath being the dark. And I thought about that, like as she's going into the cave, that's when she reaches out to Kylo.
Their little force time thing you can think of kind of as a mirror as well, because they're
echoing back to each other.
When they're not really there, they're only seeing the other person. So it's not like they're seeing their surroundings, they're only seeing sort of what's reflected by the other person.
Right, yeah. I think the mirror between the two of them is very pronounced. And it'll be interesting to see if that mirroring continues or if they both choose to diverge.
Oh, yeah, I think they're already, well, Rey is anyway, but it's just, and it goes back to the beginning even, Rey had this bad childhood, but ends up being a good, or at least, light side, good-hearted person. And Kylo, in theory, had a decent enough upbringing. We don't know how great parents they were, but they were okay. And they, I'm sure Luke was a nurturing teacher / uncle until this whole darkness thing happened and he kind of got crazy about it. So
she probably in a way feels that he had everything that she ever wanted and is probably very upset about it.
Mm-hmm.
About him, in her mind, throwing it away.
Yeah, they're like mirror opposites, I guess, if that makes any sense.
I understand that. There's also, people reflecting on things, like Luke is definitely reflecting on his mistakes as he's on Ahch-To.
That's his entire point. Like
exactly.
He's both running from them in a way and reflecting, just
looking at it every day.
Yeah.
At the same time. And I think that Leia has that moment of reflection. Leia seems like the character that is always going forward and never looking backward, and just trying to make the right decisions all the time. But I think that especially you see on Crate, when she sits down and truly believes that no one's there to come and help her, that, she's reflecting on her life and the rebellion and wondering how much of it was worth it.
I think you could say the same thing about that very iconic scene of her with the jacket kind of pulled up where she's just staring over the edge.
Oh, yeah.
That scene has reflection written all over it.
Well, yeah. She's reflecting upon the last time she was in Crate.
Yeah, or like the last time she was in this kind of situation, like dire straits. Probably, I imagine it was similar to
being on the Death Star.
Yeah, well, their predicament in A New Hope, where they're waiting to get blown up unless someone saves them. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the way it was there. If something doesn't happen, we are doomed.
Yeah. I also think there's a lot of reflection back to the rebellion in this movie.
Yeah, definitely. It's a slow sort of turn of really. It feels like, especially in this movie, which it doesn't feel unnatural. Really, they were trying to say in The Force Awakens, "Oh, we're the Resistance. We're not the rebels anymore." But it was one of those things where we're really still the rebels. We're not rebelling against our actual government, so that feels wrong to call ourselves that. So yeah, it's you can tell they were kind of mirroring that rebellion the whole time, and now they're kind of accepting it and going back full force.
And I think that this is a moment of reflection for all of these new characters who are reflecting upon themselves and the lessons of those of the rebellion, those before them.
That's true.
Poe does it, Rey is doing it, really Finn as well, learning from, DJ in a way, who was probably there before.
Yeah, I would say in that scene where he's deciding, Finn, to sacrifice himself, he's kind of, reflecting on that idea that he's kind of had in his head of self-preservation and escape. And he's decided, no, I'm going to be the one to sacrifice this time. I'm going to be the one that helps other people move on rather than finding the way to move on myself.
That kind of goes into another thing we're going to talk about was isolation and abandonment. So Finn has this, continual theme of abandonment of his responsibility.
Yeah, for sure.
Running away, preservation, that sort of thing. And he's really coming to confront it now, especially when he is choosing whether to stay with the Resistance rebellion, or basically take the advice of this scruffy guy that he met in a casino.
This perfect character. Yeah, and that's one thing. DJ sort of embodies both isolation and abandonment, because he keeps himself isolated and will readily abandon whatever he's doing if something else is more profitable or, will get him to not be killed, or both in the instance of his appearance in The Last Jedi. So he's kind of the character who has not only adapted to these two qualities, but has embraced them fully and has really made them his mantra. Whereas a lot of the other characters, like Luke, is definitely isolation and abandonment on Ahch-To. He's isolating himself purposefully, and he's basically abandoned his sister, the galaxy, Jedi.
He's abandoned the Jedi, quote unquote, teachings.
Yeah. He's abandoned the Force even. He
he's
cuts
closed himself off, which is
he's just done with everything except spearfishing and green milk.
And Rey is kind of running away from her abandonment.
Yeah, which is an odd. She was clinging to her abandonment for so long, for basically most of The Force Awakens. She was
wanting to go back to Jakku, wanting to stay in hopes that she would no longer be abandoned.
Yeah, she had been abandoned, but she didn't want to abandon where she was abandoned.
Yeah. Well, she's now seeking out that approval from others. Kylo comments on it, and it's interesting to see her come to terms with the abandonment. And it's been how she deals with Kylo using that as a weapon against her.
And it's one of those things where it's a very common thing people do. You take that personal information that and sure, he got some of it by his Force vision, mind probe thing he did in TFA.
But some of it was from herself, and what he did with it, instead of, whenever you tell someone something that's personal about you, you expect them to respect it, and he used it against her, which is, telling. And so other than that, abandonment, we kind of talked about Kylo and his feelings of abandonment from his father, perhaps from Luke especially.
Yeah, he probably feels like he was abandoned by everyone.
His mother.
Yeah, because I don't think
whether it's true or not.
Yeah,
but
exactly. I don't think it was actually like they just dumped him on. It's not like they sent him to Jedi boarding school because they didn't want to deal with him. But there's still a sense of abandonment there, whether it's done with
love or
a negative or positive vibe.
Exactly.
It's still, your parents aren't there anymore. So
yeah, exactly. So
it's not like you were sold for booze money, but still.
Right. It's a little different.
Poor Rey.
Poor Rey. Gosh, heartbreaks for her.
I know.
And then the last feeling of abandonment is, Leia. She in that moment where she says the spark of the rebellion is out, or I don't know how she phrases it.
Yeah, just basically where she's found out that people have heard her. Like, that's a pretty decisive abandonment right there.
Mm-hmm. Because think about how many of those can she take?
Right, and she was so sure, because at this point she's probably thinking to herself, how many times have I answered similar calls? And I finally put the call out myself, and not only does no one come, but they leave me on read.
Yeah, leave me on read. Oh my God. You work with high schoolers
I'm so
too much.
hip.
But it also is fitting that the person who she probably felt the most abandonment, like she felt the pain and sting of abandonment from the most, was the one who showed up.
That's true, yeah. That probably, even if things had gone completely wrong, at least they had that.
Which that kind of leads me to the idea of ghosts and how in Star Wars we see this theme of Force ghosts and apparitions and people always still being there. The line, no one's ever truly gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In our world, ghosts are people who are holding on. And in Star Wars, it seems to be the Force ghosts are people who are able to let go.
Yeah, it's sort of an opposite idea. Like, if everything's good with you, for the most part, the way we think of ghosts, then you don't become a ghost. You just get to go to whatever your afterlife is. But if you have some debt or some revenge motif or whatever,
you live.
You hang around as a sort of ghost figure, where, like you said, in Star Wars, the way to become a Force ghost and become part of the Force is to literally let go of everything and just sort of
become one with the Force. And that's
have nothing left.
If you don't have that desire to stay, you're allowed to stay.
Yeah, there you go.
Whereas, you may still be living if you can't give it up like Maul.
Yeah, then you end up with spider legs.
See? Let go.
Oof, yeah, for sure.
But it seems like Force ghosts are the ones... Well, Luke doesn't become a Force ghost. Well, his case is a little bit special, I guess. But he had unfinished business, and he had to basically reconcile that before becoming one with the Force.
And I wonder if he thought that, I'm sure he's talked to the other 3 Force ghosts and maybe even Qui-Gon's disembodied voice to figure out how it's done. And I think he went to Ahch-To, like he said, to die, but probably to die that way. And then it didn't happen. He was like, okay, well, forget all this. I'm just going to shut myself off from the Force and be a spear fisherman. And then when he decides to come back to it, maybe he realizes or feels in the Force, or maybe he's known the whole time that this is what he has to deal with. And then he'll be, allowed, so to speak, to become one with the Force.
Right. And I also wondered the see you around kid line is how that's going to play out. I think that Kylo is going to be very haunted by his past in some sort of way.
Yeah, I think we see that with what Snoke says to him about, he says, I killed Han Solo when the moment came, I didn't hesitate. And he's like, and look what it did to you. It tore you apart,
Mm-hmm.
So it's already not working the way that he thought it would. And, he sees the dice, he deals with Luke and fails. He couldn't pull the trigger on his mom.
I'm wondering what the implications of him killing Snoke are going to be on him.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Because he's clearly not finished with his training, and he has no one to help him now.
Yeah, that's true.
Unless he actually is talking to some Force
Vader
ghost version of Darth Vader. I don't know.
Who knows? But speaking of death,
morbidity.
Another theme that we'll round this out with is sacrifice and heroes. One of my favorite lines is dead heroes.
No leaders. Yeah, that's true. And really, that's kind of something we deal with in real life all the time. How many times before 9/11 did you ever really hear of first responders referred to as heroes? It took a catastrophe and people putting their lives on the line and, dying to be considered heroes. It's not something that you really want to aspire to. Superhero, on the other hand, that's something you want to aspire to. Like, go jump in a vat of toxic waste and see what happens.
Right.
Just kidding, don't do that.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like, it's good to be a hero, but, at what cost?
Right, that's a good point. There are certainly...
And it is, you think about it, and it's something that Poe has to learn in this movie, is the value of sacrifice and understanding the responsibility of being in charge of others sacrifice, putting them in that position, because they will, because they're good people.
Mm-hmm.
Paige is going to do that because she's a hero, period. Does she need to go be in a situation where she needs to be sacrificed?
Right. Had they done what they needed to do and escape, they would have been heroes anyway.
Right.
And you're exactly right. That's what Poe has to wrap his mind around, the idea that you don't always just push forward and do the most you can no matter what. As long as, you achieve your objective, everything was hunky-dory. No, man. Sometimes you've got to adapt and do what's best for the whole / greater good.
And I think you need to think about the impact of your own sacrifice. So that's something that Finn learned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure, you can sacrifice yourself and be the hero, which I would argue maybe he wouldn't have even made it. But
right, that's a whole nother
debate. But you have to think about your value. It's like that the idea of an opportunity cost.
True.
I mean, sure, you can win today, but think about all the times that your expertise can help us win tomorrow.
Right. And you can buy 2 things for $1 today, or save the $1 and buy 4 things tomorrow.
Which, I'll tell you, who really understood the idea of the right timing of sacrifice was Haldo.
Yeah, for sure. That's a case where she's kind of going down with the ship anyway, so she could sit there and watch everyone die and then die herself, or sacrifice herself in a different way to save other people.
Right.
So that's a perfect example of when to play that role.
Mm-hmm. And finally, of course, you have the sacrifice of Luke, who is thinking about the best way to do it and make an impact. Him not he couldn't have physically gotten there.
Yeah, there's no way.
Coming in a crappy X-Wing.
Yeah, you see him sputter, and he crashes, and he gets out, and he's limping over, panting. Hold on.
With a scruffy beard.
Yeah, he's doubled over, and Kylo's just what is going on?
But I think that's about it.
Yeah, I reckon that's about all we have time for anyway. So what do you guys think? What themes and such symbols did we hit on that you agree with, that you have other examples of? What did we miss? Let us know on Twitter at
hyperspace_pod.
Email us at hyperspacepodblast@gmail.com.
Or check us out online, hyperspacepodblast.com.
Yeah, boy. If you're in the market for a little Audible entertainment, head over to www.audibletrial.com/hyperspace, and you can get yourself a free audiobook and 30-day trial of Audible.
All right. Talk to you later, guys.
Bye.
Bye.